All right, welcome back to John Bachman Now. It's the insurgency versus the insurgency. Which one is real and which one is less than real? NBC News reporting Friday night that there is a national terrorism alert ahead of the anniversary for 9/11 from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. And these are the potential threats: opposition to COVID measures, claims of election fraud, belief that Trump can be reinstated, and looking at 9/11 anniversary and religious holidays with some enthusiasm. Let's talk about this now and what real insurgency looks like, and welcome in Isabel Brown from Turning Point USA. Also back with us, Dan O'Donnell from Milwaukee and News Talk 1130, and Ari Hoffman from 570 KVI in Seattle. Great to have everyone with us. Now, according to the Department of Homeland Security, Ari, if you oppose mandatory COVID restrictions or think election integrity is something we should look at, or if you are patriotic, even display a little bit of patriotism, you very well may be an insurgent.
You know, these people should have tried coming here last summer. Insurgency, the armed occupation of 6 blocks of downtown Seattle, where you had Antifa and BLM soldiers standing guard at various intersections, not allowing businesses to do business, not allowing people in or out of their homes, not allowing people to cover it. Meanwhile, the media was too busy calling this the Summer of Love, or a block party, or a street fair, or a mostly peaceful protest. Meanwhile, 6 people were shot inside that autonomous zone. 2 people were killed. All of them were African Americans. Rapes, robberies, murders all went up 250%. If they want to know what a real insurrection looks like, they probably should have covered it when it was happening.
Yeah, and I don't want to discount what happened in Seattle, but so specifically we see the Taliban, Isabel, just walking all over everyone and everything in Afghanistan. And I'm not saying extremism isn't an issue here, but the way that the U.S. government talks about a lot of folks, and the ones who didn't enter the Capitol, they certainly set people up for believing, maybe, if they want to kind of go in this direction, yeah, these folks are dangerous, these folks are insurgents. But again, we have to remind folks, no one's been charged with an insurgency, no one's been charged with sedition yet as it relates to the Capitol breach.
Since January the 6th, I've been very worried about this allegation of domestic terrorists being placed on virtually anyone who did not vote for our current president of the United States in the last election cycle. You heard that rhetoric over and over again in January, and it's being repeated today that individuals who support individual liberty and personal freedom, retaining our Constitution and what it means to be the United States of America, are now labeled as domestic terrorists. And it's incredibly ironic this week as we see the rise of the Taliban again in Afghanistan and ongoing threats to attack the United States again, that as we get closer to the September 11th commemoration of 9/11 in 2001, if you dare to commemorate that day, if you dare to remember the 3,000 Americans who lost their lives and how we came together as a nation in the face of unspeakable evil, you now are the terrorists, never mind the actual terrorists that are threatening to attack the United States. This language is out of control, and sadly, individuals in my generation have been asleep for far too long of what 9/11 looked like, what the rise of terrorism overseas and the threat of absolute terror to Western countries like the United States looked like throughout our childhood. But I think, unfortunately, we're getting ready for a crash course in this history again as it repeats itself in 2021.
Dan, when you list those things that make you a terrorist in the eyes of the Department of Homeland Security, that describes a lot of America.
And this once again shows just how unserious the Biden administration is when it comes to combating real terrorism. The exact same weekend that this list gets publicized, Kabul falls to a terrorist-backing regime who we had defeated in 2002, who we had essentially driven from power 2 decades ago. And now the threat is very real that there will be some sort of terror threat tied to the 20th anniversary of 9/11. It certainly isn't coming from the quote-unquote radical right wing, which is waiting for Trump to be reinstated. It is going to come from what was pre-9/11 the base of terrorist operations, and what apparently could be again the base of terrorist operations, Afghanistan, under the Taliban's control. This is a Biden administration that is unserious and that fundamentally does not understand the real threat to American national security. And that is sadly coming once again from foreign-born radical jihadists.
This all comes as the mother of Capitol rioter Ashli Babbitt says Nancy Pelosi has ignored 12 calls from her. The mother of the Air Force veteran says she hasn't heard from any lawmaker about her daughter's death on January 6th. And of course, this was after she climbed through the window there and she was shot. And, you know, she should not have been in the building. That's obvious, as no one should have. No one should have broken into the building here. But she's being treated like a terrorist, Ashli Babbitt. Her parents feel like they're being treated as terrorists as well. And this is the, you know, they're trying to make some equivalency here to this, to 9/11, to the Oklahoma City attack. Ashli Babbitt wasn't armed. All right, and I mean, she was in the wrong place at the wrong time in the act of committing a crime, trespassing on the Capitol grounds. But to make this comparison to 9/11 to Ashli Babbitt, where does it end?
Well, it's not going to end, because the only argument that the left has is that the January 6th riot was like 9/11, because then they'd have to address the riots that tore apart this country over 2020, caused over $5 billion in damage, dozens of people dead, never mind what it did to small businesses. And the majority of people who suffered during this whole thing were minorities, were African Americans. But they don't want to discuss that. So what they have to do is keep blowing up January 6th as big as they can possibly make it, so that people will stop asking them about those riots. Why is there not just the riot committee discussing all of this? By the way, I would back something like this. We should know everything that caused January 6th, just like we should know everything that caused the riots across the country last year. But at the same time, that's not what it's about.
Right.
What it's about is painting everybody who voted for Donald Trump as a terrorist, as if they had perpetrated 9/11.
You know, there is a lot of, you know, questioning going on right now. Obviously, everyone wants to know where Joe Biden is. You haven't heard a lot from Democratic members of Congress on the Afghanistan issue. But given that situation, Isabel, I guess I would imagine they'll still proceed with the January 6th Joint Committee here unabated, even though Afghanistan, I mean, they wanted to get that part of their, you know, want to get this out of the way so they could focus on really January 6th, I guess.
I'm sure they will, and I'm sure there will be no shortage of words from our Democrat lawmakers about the current domestic terrorists in their eyes who continue to push for answers on Ashli Babbitt, on what truly happened on January the 6th, and of course election integrity in our last election. But make no mistake about it, the silence here on Afghanistan and what is happening with the rise of actual terrorist organizations, the Taliban and Al-Qaeda included, is deafening. And that should tell you everything you need to know about the priorities of this presidential administration, our Speaker of the House, and virtually every lawmaker on the left in Washington, D.C. They are not interested in representing you, the American people, or your interests, and they would rather have the media cover for actual terrorists while they point the finger at you and use the same words.
Now, there are some reports, Dan, that there could be as many as 30,000 unvetted Afghan refugees coming to this country. And again, this goes to the complete breakdown of the Biden administration and their inability to foresee what this would actually look like. They should not be surprised by this, but they are. They're way back on their heels, even though they were warned many times that this would happen.
And several thousand of those refugees are going to be in my neck of the woods at Fort McCoy in Wisconsin. I believe some others are going to be potentially going to Fort Hood. It is unconscionable and inconceivable that the Biden administration didn't know the likeliest outcome of their disastrous withdrawal. They've been told for months, for years, that too rapid of a withdrawal would lead to the exact sort of humanitarian disaster. And that's what this is, a humanitarian disaster that's unfolding right now in Kabul. The pictures that are coming in from Kabul International Airport are absolutely heartbreaking, as people are so desperate to flee the Taliban that they're quite literally trying to grab onto planes that are taking off. I believe the Wall Street Journal described this as Saigon on steroids. And it is, again, as I said, yet again, the Biden administration just not understanding what the real threat to American national security is, and instead playing politics with this idea that their political opponents are the most dangerous terrorist threats that we face. You are looking right now at the country from which the gravest terrorist threat might now emerge in Afghanistan.
That's the question. And again, we're expecting to hear from President Biden in about 2 hours from now. Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, was on NBC earlier today. Here's what he had to say.
President Biden was not prepared to usher in a third decade of war and put U.S. troops in harm's way, fighting and dying to try to hold Afghanistan together when its own armed forces would not fight to hold it together.
I'm sorry, that's Jake Sullivan on CBS this morning, but that's, what we expect to hear, Ari, from the White House later today. A lot of blame on the Afghan army, a lot of blame on the previous administration.
Meanwhile, they're not going to talk about how Joe Biden didn't allow Air Force mechanics in to help and assist and get those jets ready. They're not going to talk about how weeks ago we knew that these pilots were being assassinated in Afghanistan by the Taliban, and that anybody with an IQ over 10 saw this coming. My own kids yesterday, when we're driving around Seattle listening to the radio of this tragedy, were saying, Dad, how'd they not know this was going to happen when they pulled out of Afghanistan? And I said to my 10-year-old daughter, yeah, you're right. How'd they not know this was going to happen?
I had a similar moment yesterday when my daughter asked where the president was, and I said he's on vacation, and she's like, not good, and she's 9 years old. The kids, no, this is bad. The optics are bad, even so bad that kids can't even understand how bad it is. Dan, Ari, Isabel, thank you guys.
Hey, I'm Rob Finnerty. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please join the conversation in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, too. Hit the bell icon to be alerted to breaking news. And remember, there's a whole lot more on Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news network. Newsmax TV, we're real news for real people.